Hello everyone, it is me Tsumugi. Welcome back to my Warhammer 40k video, and today we're going to be on our second part of how to become a better Warhammer 40k player. Today we're going to talk about, yes you guessed it, the Math Hammer. Now Math Hammer is a topic that a lot of people probably heard about before, but not really sure what it is, and they don't know how to actually run a Math Hammer, so this is why we're here today. In this video, you will learn how to use Math Hammer to your advantage on making decisions, and as well as choosing the war gear and unit type for your army list. So, without further ado, let's get started. So what is Math Hammer? Now, if you heard this term before, you probably get it somewhere in like a competitive Warhammer 40k forums or websites or like community. You probably heard this term before. Now, what Math Hammer essentially is just a process of calculating the expected value for dice rolling. You can then use the result from the probability you have calculated to make a more informed decision. And that's what essentially Math Hammer is. Informed decisions such as choosing weapons or units, or choosing which unit to target. As I talked about before in my target prioritized video, if you haven't seen it, the link is right there, I think. You can go check it out if you want to. In that video, I delved a little bit into the Math Hammer aspect, but I didn't go all out until today. So today we're going to talk about like everything Math Hammer. Now, obviously, before we start talking about Math Hammer, we have to talk about what Math Hammer isn't, all right? Now, first of all, the biggest misconception is like Math Hammer basically just help you win games. Like, it does not help you win games. It is not a be all end all kind of deal. It does not represent the actual gameplay at all. But the actual gameplay involves strategy, positioning, obviously most importantly what we're talking about here today, dice luck. You know, dice luck is not controlled. You can only chase for the probability that will stack your odds better than your opponent. That's pretty much it, but you cannot expect like a certain result out of Math Hammer. Even if you have 97% chance of succeeding, you still have 3% chance of failing, because in Warhammer 40k, you can always fail on a roll of 1. So regardless of how powerful a certain unit or model is, if you roll 1, it's a fail. You know, that's the constant. That's the only constant in this game that you cannot escape. So like I said, once again, Math Hammer is not a be-all end-all kind of deal. You cannot expect this to help you to just make all the decisions. It should use as a tool to assist you in making those decisions, but it should not be the only guideline you follow when it comes to making such decisions, all right? And obviously, it does not guarantee you a certain result, like I said, and of course, it does not represent a unit's power, such as firepower, survivability, and efficiency. So now we know what a Math Hammer is and isn't. Let's start to talk about some basic stats, alright? So the basic is, let's start with D6, because that's the most essential part of all the calculation we're going to do here today. A D6 is basically a single six-sided die. The probability of six-sided die is actually pretty easy to get. The chance of getting a single side is 1/6, which is about 16% chance. But when in Warhammer, we usually refer something to like a 2+, 3+, 4+, 5+, and etc., right? What it means is like, okay, so for instance, when we say a 3+, we're talking about when you roll a d6 and you get a result of a 3, 4, 5, 6, then the roll is considered as successful. And as the number grows larger, the requirement goes higher as well. So for instance, when it says a 6+, it means that you have to roll a 6 in order for that roll to be considered as a success. So there's only 1/6 chance for that to happen, which is aka 16% chance. So as you can see on the left hand corner, you can see all the probability has been already calculated out. Feel free to just jot it down and then write it down, because this is quite important. You might want to like put it somewhere in your notepad or somewhere if you can remember it. But the easy way to calculate them is just simply divide by 6. You know, when we say 2+, it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which is 5 different numbers. 5 divided by 6, you get 83%. You know, so it's pretty easy to calculate. You don't have to jot it down if you know how it works. Here we go. Now, when we say rolling a d6, so for instance, when we say, oh, what's the chance of hitting with Imperial Guard's last gun? Imperial Guard has a ballistic skill of a 4, right? So a 4 plus is needed in order for Imperial Guard to hit with their last gun. So the probability of hitting with a single last gun with a single roll, it's about 50%. It's a 50% chance, 50-50, it can go either way. Whereas for Space Marine, they need a 3 plus to hit their bow weapons, and they have a 66% chance of hitting with that bow weapon in every single roll, alright? Generally speaking, like a group of Marine, when they're shooting their weapon, there's a 66% chance of all their hit is going to land, and then there's about a 33% chance it's going to miss. Alright, so this is the basic of the d6 roll when it comes to the probability. So now we know that the calculating the probability of rolling a d6 is relatively simple. Let's move on to the re-rolling aspect of this, because re-rolling happens all the time. Gilliman with his re-roll all, or Dark Angel with their re-roll 1, when staying stationary. There's a bunch of re-roll resources that you can use. Now, this is why I want to include the re-rolls, because someone might actually run into a little bit of trouble when it comes to calculating the probability of something succeeding when it comes to re-rolling. So let's take a look at the how do we actually calculate this. Obviously, first of all, you use the chance of actually rolling a 1. So let's take the 2 plus reroll 1, for example. All right, the chance of rolling a 1 is 16% chance, which is represented by 0.16 right here. And then you multiply that by the base chance of succeeding, which in 2 plus case will be 83%. Now 83% once again are represented by the number 0.83. So you multiply 0.83 by 0.16, you get a number 0.13. Now the 0.13 is not a probability of succeeding, is the increase of the probability for re-rolling a 1. So you then add the 0.13 to the base chance of succeeding, which is 0.83, and then you get 0.96. Now 0.96 can be then translated into a percentage, which is 96%. All right, so now we know how this is being calculated. You can pretty much just work out the rest yourself. So this is just re-rolling 1, right? And let's move on to the reroll all. Now the reroll all is a little bit tricky, but it's still pretty, it's pretty simple to understand. That's since 2 plus reroll all and 2 plus reroll 1 are basically the same thing, because you're just rolling ones, right? Let's take the 3 plus, for example, right? So when it comes to 3 plus reroll all, it's actually 30. You have to multiply by 0.33. Because you're granted the chance of rolling a 1 and a 2. So not just rolling 1, when you roll a 2, you'll also get the chance of re-rolling that die when it comes to a 2, right? You got 1 and a 2, so that's 2 over 6. 2 over 6 equals to 0.33. So you use 0.33 multiplied by 0.66, which is the original chance of 3 plus. And then you get the answer once again. Then you add the answer to the base probability of 3 plus, and then you get 0.87. Now 0.87 translating to percentage, once again 87% chance of succeeding when it comes to 3 plus and reroll all. So now we understand that the basic of reroll 1 and reroll all. So I want to tell you that why am I showing you this list, because there's actually some tactic and strategy and decision making involved, not just in the actual rolling of a dice, but when it comes to building your army list. For instance, okay, let's take a look at the 2 plus reroll 1 and 2 plus reroll all case once again. Now obviously, like I said, these two basically yield the same probability, because rerolling 1 and rerolling all when it comes to 2 plus is exactly the same thing. It's effectively the same thing, okay? However, in order to gain access of reroll all, you might have to pay more point in order to get that buff, right? Whereas reroll 1 is a little bit easier accessible, okay? So I'm talking about, of course, Dark Angel here. We all know that Dark Angel gain the ability to reroll 1 if they remain stationary in their shooting attack. Okay, so we're talking about something like maybe Dark Angel Hellblaster here. Hellblaster with heavy plasma incinerator. They want to remain stationary in the first place. They're not really mobile. They're not really moving. So yeah, they will have to reroll 1 by default. Now the question is, then is it actually worth it to give them Azrael? Now, for those non-Dark Angel player out there, Azrael is an expensive HQ unit that gives the aura ability that allows the nearby Dark Angel within 6 inches to reroll all their hit rolls. Now, obviously, Hellblaster has a ballistic skill for 3+. When we compare it, 3+ reroll 1, and then 3+ reroll all. So as we can see here, 3+ reroll 1 is 76%, whereas 3+ reroll all is 87% chance. Now, obviously, this is increased the chance by 21%, and this is only increased by 10%. So, in that scenario, then bringing Azrael might be worth it because you're actually gaining something in return, right? You're not just relying on the reroll 1, you're actually relying on a reroll all that Azrael actually provides you. However, if today I choose to bring a Phobos Lieutenant, which is a much cheaper version of HQ for Dark Angels, and they gain the exclusive Warlord trait for Phobos Space Marine, which is target priority. Now, target priority gives +1 to plus skill for a single unit. Now, if we apply that, if we apply that buff to the Hellblasters, that will effectively make Hellblaster into a 2+ Blizzard skill. Now, if I do that, then there's no point taking Azrael, because now you'll basically you just need the reroll 1, which is effectively the same as reroll all that Azrael will provide you when you have 2+ Blizzard skill. So do you see what's going on here? Is like, if you actually think about this, if you actually think about, okay, so 2+ reroll 1, 2+ reroll all, they're effectively the same thing, but in order to access reroll all, you actually have to pay more points or more war gear, more HQ, more whatever resources that's available to you to get that. Reroll all is a lot more scarce when it comes to reroll 1. You really need to think about, is it actually worth it to take a reroll all over reroll 1? Because sometimes point-wise, it might not be worth it. All right, this is just one small takeaway I want you guys to remember that. When you're using Math Hammer, especially, you have to look past the number and then just start thinking about, can I actually potentially save more resources, aka point, when it comes to optimizing my list? This is just one of the example. There are many more stuff like this you need to think about, which I'm not gonna cover all of them today, but that's just something small that you can just use as example when you come to thinking about whether you want to pick up the reroll 1 or reroll all buff. So after talking about reroll 1 and reroll all and how they actually apply in certain scenarios, let's talk about the actual cases. Let's walk you through what the normal Math Hammer process looks like. Okay, so first of all, the most important part about Math Hammer is that you're using it as a scientific way to work out some data. You're not doing this by comparing oranges to apples. You can't do that. Some conditions has to be the same, or some condition has to be ignored in order for a good comparison to be drawn. All right. So in this scenario, let's talk about the one that's it's pretty much a hot topic recently. Is which one's better for Flying Half Tyrant, Depth Spitter or Devourer? Now this obviously is not just for Flying Half Tyrant. This also applies to something like Carnifex. People asking which weapon's better, Depth Spitter or Devourer? Because there isn't a real definite answer that people can give. Usually the general consensus is just take whatever the heck you want, right? But I'm here to do some Math Hammer and then trying to answer this question at the same time, right? So which one's better, Depth Spitter or Quad Devourer, right? So let's lay out some conditions, all right? Because this is the most important part when it comes to using Math Hammer to make a decision. You have to lay out the conditions really clearly. Now, first of all, it's Quad Devourer versus Quad Depth Spitter, right? And we're targeting Guardsmen and Devastators. Both of them are not going to be in cover. Obviously, in cases Guardsmen are probably going to be out in the open and Devastators are probably going to be in cover. But for the sake of getting case-by-case comparison, we can't have that. We just have to compare it as if they're just both out in the open or they're both in cover, which will basically yield the same result, right? Now, the carrier of our experiment will be Flyrant, okay? So now we have all the conditions set. Let's get started, right? How do we compare this? Now, first of all, they both cost the same amount of point. If a weapon costs different amount of point, you can still try to compare it because you can then use the result and say, this weapon is cheaper, but this expensive weapon actually doubles the performance. Then it might actually be worth it to pay a little more just to get this slightly more expensive version because it actually outperforms the cheaper version of it. So there's a stuff like that, but in this particular case, it costs the exact same amount of point. They both cost 14 points a pair, okay? And also Flyron's mobility allows us to ignore the range difference between two weapons. As you know it, that Death Spitter has a range of 24 inches and Devour has a range of 18 inches. Now obviously you have to put this into comparison, but since first of all we cannot quantify range when it comes to determine which one is better, and also because Flyron has such a high mobility that the range of Devour and Death Spitter are usually not very important, you know, like since Flyron can fly all the fucking places in the first place, like having an 18-inch weapon doesn't really stop you from shooting at whatever you want, because like you pretty much can fly anywhere. So in this case, in this particular scenario, we're just assuming that the range of the weapon does not matter in this calculation. All right, so what we're comparing here is the pure damage dealing capability. As we can see right here, the first case is Death Spitter targeting Guardsman. Okay, so this is how we do it. Okay, first of all, you need to hit, right? You have to hit and then to wound, and then the unit take the armor save, and if it failed to save, then you see how much damage you actually dealt, right? This is the general process of it. So let's take a look. Now, since we're talking about quad Death Spitter, each Death Spitter has 3 shot, and the quad Death Spitter has 12 shot, right? So 12 shot, you multiply by a 66% chance, which is 3 plus ballistic skill, and you will get 7.92 hit. Now, this is just hitting, and then you take the hit, and then you multiply by the chance of wounding, which, you know, strength 7 versus toughness 3, you will wound them on a 2+, and the 2+ is translated into 83% when it comes to Math Hammer. So you then multiply it by 7.92 hits, and you will get 6.57 wounds. Now, this is not the actual wounds, you know. Remember, Guardsmen can still take their armor save, which is a 5+, but since they're being targeted by Death Spitter, which has a -1 AP, they can only save on the 6 up. So as we can see here, 6.57 wounds multiplied by 83. Okay, 83%. Why 83%? Okay, this is very easy because we're trying to calculating how much wound we're actually causing, not how much the Guardsman can save, because if you're just going to multiply it by the 6 up armor save, which is, you know, the chance for them to save is 16% chance, right? And if you multiply that by that, it will just be like how much they can save. But we want to see how much damage we can actually deal, so we use 1 minus 0.16, which we get the 0.83. That's the chance of actual death will be causing. As you can see, that 12 shot of Death Spitter on average, okay, I need to stress this again, on average, this is not a definite answer, it's just on average it will cause about 5 deaths for a Guardsman that's not sitting in cover and that's getting shot by a Flyron with quad Death Spitter. You know, okay, so now we have the number. Let's move on to the second scenario, which we're using Devour, also quad Devour, to shoot against the same target under the same condition. And you can basically just read it. Now, since Devour is 6 shot per piece, all right, and since you're taking quad, which, you know, you have 4 of them, you have 24 shot. Now you have double the shot. Okay, you have double the shot. Now obviously it gives you much better result when it comes to hitting, but when it comes to armor saving, you do not have the AP -1. The Guardsman can actually save on a 5 up, not a 6 up, so the chance of actually wounding has been decreased. Compared to 83%, we can only actually causing death by 66%. Okay, so on average, okay, once again, this is totally on average, we cause more deaths compared to Death Spitter. So now we reach a short conclusion that when it comes to shooting at Guardsmen out in the open or in cover, it doesn't really matter, because the value will be exactly the same. Because if you compare the Guardsmen in cover, then it would just basically increase their survivability, like they will have less death, but overall the ratio between Death Spitter and Devour death will remain pretty much the same. So now we have a short conclusion that, okay, when shooting at Guardsmen, Devour is better than Death Spitter when it comes to average damage dealing, all right? And then let's move on. Let's move on to the second scenario. Okay, let's talk about what about if we shoot at like a Space Marine? Because this is like the most common argument. People are talking about, Devourer is good versus Guardsman, but Death Spitter is better when it comes to shooting at Space Marine because they have AP, right? Death Spitter has AP, Devourer does not have AP, and Space Marine has really good armor, and you know it would just bounce off all the Devourer shot because it has no AP. That's the common argument, right? So why don't we do the same scenario here? Okay, so let's take a look. It's the exact same thing. Okay, 12 shot. hit on 3s and then wound on 3s because toughness 4 and strength 7, so you wound on 3s, not 2s. You'll cause about 5 wounds, and then 5 wounds, and then you multiply by their save, which the regular Space Marine save is a 3 up armor save, but since we have Death Spitter, it's -1 AP, so it becomes a 4+. A single salvo 12 shot of Death Spitter shooting at Space Marine will cost on average about 2.61 deaths. All right, that's the death it will be causing on average. But if we look at Devour, we have 24 shot, still hitting on 3+ ballistic skill, and then we use the hit and then multiply by the chance of wounding, which is exactly the same by the way, because strength 6 versus toughness 4, you still wound them on a 3 up, and that aspect is exactly the same. But however, when it comes to penetrating their armor, which is going through their armor save, they retain their 3+ armor save because Devour does not have AP. However, even in cases like this, we still cause on average more deaths than Death Spitter. We cause 3.44 deaths. So now we have a conclusion. For those who say that, okay, Death Spitter is better if you have a Marine heavy meta, and Devour is better if you have an IG heavy meta, that statement might not be so true anymore. Okay, it might be true in some cases, it could be, but as the numbers shown here, regardless of what they're trying to shoot, okay, they have exact same condition, we have exact same setup, quad for both sides, quad for Death Spitter, quad for Devour, and when it comes to the average result, it just seems that Devour are just arbitrarily better because, like, as you can see, it's like they cause more wounds versus Guardsmen and it cause more wounds versus Space Marine. So does that mean that Devour is just inherently better than Death Spitter? Is it just, like end of the story, right? I mean, usually that will be put at the end of the story. That's pretty much it, right? The end. But I want to use this example to let you guys know this is just numbers, calculations, average probability. This does not mean anything. Death Spitter can be good not only because it might have a slightly longer range, it also means that you have much wider choice of targets, because just because you have much longer range, like I said at the very beginning, in this very particular scenario, we're ignoring some of the aspect that we just simply cannot quantify in this calculation, such as the range of the weapon, right? However, now it seems like, okay, Death Spitter are losing every single aspect, so why bother using Death Spitter in the first place? Now, if you use Death Spitter, okay, in conjunction with Pathogenic Slime Stratagem, which increase a monster's shooting attacks damage by 1, you will then transform the damage of Death Spitter from a strength 7 AP1 damage over 1, and it becomes strength 7 AP1 damage over 2. Now that is an auto-cannon weapon, as you can recall from my previous video. That is an auto-cannon type weapon. Now that thing can potentially be good versus other targets, not just Space Marine, not just Guardsmen. It can actually be potentially wounding something like Custodian Bikes, it can potentially wound something like XP104, stuff like that. So once again, I just want to use this example to tell you guys, okay, on paper, in this particular scenario, okay, when it comes to shooting at Guardsmen and Space Marine, it might be okay to say that Devour is better in both of these aspects, but this does not mean Devour is superior to Death Spitter in every single other aspect. Like there's a lot of stuff I just talked about when you consider like stratagems and shooting other targets. This is just one part of the comparison that you can draw, and then you can, okay, you know what, if I'm only taking this weapon just for these two type of target, then here's my result. Then I probably should take Devour over Death Spitter, but this does not mean Death Spitter is just inherently bad. That's what I'm trying to get. This is like the biggest takeaway I want you guys to understand with Math Hammer. I don't want you guys just like grab all these data and just start calculating stuff and then just like, oh, okay, this weapon is the best, use this weapon because math says so. And then you have to understand that when it comes to like calculating all these Math Hammer stuff, you are either voluntarily or involuntarily trying to ignore some aspect of the weapon and the unit you're trying to compare. That you really have to, otherwise, like I said at the very top, you have to lay out some conditions. You have to lay out conditions, and that condition might not apply to every single cases. Once again, I know I hate to sound like a broken record, Math Hammer is cool. It is cool. You can use it to calculate some of the decision making and stuff. Let's say if you're trying to shoot at like a Lima Ross battle tank with your Rupture Cannon, and you're thinking about, is it possible for me to actually kill with this turn, or should I shoot at the Castle Knight over there? When it comes to decision like that, you can actually use Math Hammer to obviously you have to do this before you even play the game, because like I said in my previous video, it's really lame to just grab a calculator and start punching numbers and then see which is the better result. First of all, it makes you look stupid, and second of all, you're wasting everyone's time. However, what you can do in your free time is actually doing the calculation before the game even begins. You know, like, yes, you cannot predict what your opponent will bring, but there are some general stat line that's just very common. You know, that's why I did like my previous video about the unit and weapon types. Like, not every unit has the same unit stat, and not every weapon has the same weapon stat, but at least you can use the weapon that you will bring in your list. Trying to run a test like this, trying to set up a scenario like this, and then say, okay, if I bring this kind of weapon, let's say I bring the Imperial Cannon, what are the average damage I will be doing versus a toughness 8 3+ armor save unit, such as Lima Ross Battle Tank? What's the probability of that to happen? You know, what's the average wound of it? And then you do the calculation, and then you get like a number. Okay, so 1 round of Hive Guard shooting, I'll be expecting doing something like 8 damage, right? I'm just making that up, by the way. So you'll probably do something like 8 damage on average, all right? On average. Now, if you're in the game and you can just grab a piece of paper and you can just read it, obviously this is legal. Like, I don't think there's any tournament that stop you from reading your own data and shit. You can just grab a piece of paper and then you can read it. It's like, okay. So if that Lima Russ has like less than 8 wounds, right? Because it has less than 8 wounds, and that means on average, I should be able to kill it. So, you know, I'll go for it, because I have the calculation done here. On average, this is just how much they deal. But if the Lima Russ Battle Tank has like full health, then there is a very high probability that even on average you can't kill it. Then maybe you should think about, maybe I should shoot at something else instead. You know, like something that actually have a chance to kill, instead of something that I may or may not have a chance to kill. And this is, like I said again, this is all probability, and you have to think for yourself. Math Hammer is here to help you to make a more informed decision, but it should not be the only thing you look at when it comes to making such decisions. Alright, that's pretty much it. I hope this video gives you like a brief introduction of Math Hammer. I know this is like pretty fast and like brief. Obviously, like I said earlier, you can find all these numbers in the description, and if I haven't, just send me a message or comments or whatever and let me know what you guys need next. So this is like the second course of how to become a better Warhammer 40k player. Feel free to just grab this and then start playing with your army. Like, read over your list, like understand all the weapons you're bringing, use the unit type thing I have drew in my previous video, and then start comparing your weapon to some common unit stats that you'll be facing, and then start having some numbers down. And next time when you go to a tournament, you don't have to grab a calculator out and punch in numbers. Okay, you just say, okay, so I have all the math calculated. When it comes to making decision, when you roll out all the other aspect and factors, and you just have to make a decision based on numbers, then you can use the Math Hammer you've calculated before the game even begins. Alright? That will just make you a much better Warhammer 40k player, instead of just relying everything on dice luck. Alright, that's pretty much it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I would like to hear more from you guys, and I have heard that people want me to talk about Gene Stealer Cult. I'm really working hard to try to get that. You know, it's coming. You know, it's coming. It really is coming. So yeah, I'll see you guys later. I hope you guys have a great day. I'll see you guys next week. Goodbye.